FishTube, how's it going? So I've been making these videos and I realize I'm getting way technical and I haven't explained my background in the fish keeping hobby. So I kind of just want to make a quick video on how I got started and why I keep fish. I remember distinctly I was about 8 years old and we had won a goldfish at the state fair, or it was Simi Valley City Fair, and it was the ping pong balls into the goldfish bowl. And I remember bringing that home and I was just blown away on how this creature could live underwater. I sat and watched that fish for hours and was just fascinated. First, his name was Goldie, original, I know. And unfortunately, I didn't know how to take care of fish. So Goldie made it about 2 weeks, and it was rough because I had fallen in love with this fish. I was feeding it breadcrumbs, and I ended up getting it some flake food, and it didn't make it. And I remember we buried it in the backyard, and I asked my dad if I could go get another goldfish. And he told me that the only way we'd get another fish is if I did some research on it. Now, I don't know as far as if I overfed it, what I did, but I was young and I wanted to fish really bad. So in those days, you could actually get on your bicycle and ride to the library. There was no internet, of course. I started reading everything I could find on fish. Wasn't much information out there, but I fell in love with them. So what information I did find, I went to the pet stores and talked to them. Got a 10-gallon tank and a new fish, and Goldie 2. And I had Goldie 2 for about 2 years, and I was hooked. I couldn't believe this creature could live underwater. And that's what kind of started it. Now, I kept that fish for about 2 years, so about 10, and I was heavily into other sports. So I really didn't get back into the fish, but I always thought about the fish. And then in my 20s, I met a breeder in California, and he was actually a pretty famous breeder. And he had a 350-gallon tank in his living room, full of Tanganyikan cichlids. Now, what was cool is he actually went to the Lake Tanganyika and collected those fish. So I was just amazed, and I would ask him all the time if I could just come over and look at his tank and talk to him, and he taught me so much about fish. Well, I didn't know at the time he had about 200 fish tanks in his backyard that he had built. It was not, I guess it was a shed, but it was actually two 100-foot homes, 100 probably by 30. And he had 100-gallon, his minimum tanks were 100-gallon. He had everything up from there, so 200-gallon. And it took me about 3 months to get into that, his breeding area. And he was pretty private, so he didn't just let anybody back there. But he could see my passion for it and all the education that he taught me. So I actually would start working for him on Saturday mornings. I would show up and I would help him clean his tanks and feed his fish. But for me, it was about learning and understanding what was going on and how to keep them properly. And it was in California, so really hard water. So it was in the 90s, and Tanganyikans were huge. All African cichlids were pretty big back then. For my payment, he would give me fish, and he would give me some pretty rare fish. I remember he gave me some Similis shell dwellers, and they were super cool, and to this day I still would love to have those back in my fish room. And then he gave me some Synodontis petricola, a small catfish, and he said they were a breeding age, they were about 3 years old, and he wanted me to go home and see if I could breed them. He said he just didn't have time. He had so many projects going that he wanted to see if I could breed these fish for him. So I took him home, and within about 2 months I had spawned him. With his guidance, he showed me how to do it and how to, take care of the eggs. There were egg scatterers and how to do the marbles and all that stuff. So ended up getting about a couple hundred of those, and I was hooked. So he would send me home, and he sent me home with the Madagascar bleaker eye. He sent me home with a pair with those, and so I ended up breeding those. And I'm not sure I was one of the first people to breed those in the United States, but I know that I was pretty close to being one of the first people. So I can't claim that because I don't know that for a fact. But that was a cool fish because of the Madagascar. Everything was being endangered as they were cutting down all the trees. So then one day he had a pair of Discus. They were a turquoise pair. I believe they were wild, but I didn't know the difference. So he asked me if I wanted them. So I said I didn't know much about them, and back then, we were trying to mimic their the Amazon. That's how we were trying to keep Discus, so soft water. And in California, the water was really hard. I mean, sometimes 400 parts per million, so really, really hard. And so I went home and set up a tank, and I did everything, with the peat, and tried to soften the water as best I could. And I'm sure it was still 250, 300. But I just kind of let the tank, there was a 60 gallon, I just kind of let it settle. And I brought those home and fell in love with the Discus. That was it. I fell in love with them. And I actually ended up spawning that pair probably about 3 months after I got them. But couldn't keep the fry because I had no idea what I was doing. And I didn't understand the water changes. I was so afraid of putting them in hard water. I didn't know what to feed them because everybody told me we had to feed live foods. Baby brine shrimp I did feed, but not enough. They have to be fed 4 or 5 times a day to really get them to grow right. So those fry lived about, I would say, 6-7 days, and then they started to fade on me. And I was working full time, so I just didn't have the time to raise Discus fry. But then I was hooked, and that's all I want to do. So I kind of cleared out all my other fish in my room, all the Tankanikans. I did keep the Synodontis, and I did keep the Similis because it was just fish that I loved. But I wanted to get into Discus. So I ended up setting 60 tanks up and breeding Discus. And I was shipping, but mostly just supplying locally. Now in California, locally is, 150, 200 miles is pretty common to drive. No, and it's not even an issue, and you can go eat all different ways. So there was 4 or 5 fish clubs every weekend. Here in Salt Lake, we have one, and they're lucky to meet 3 or 4 times a year, if that. So every weekend, I would take my spawns that I had ready that were about 4 or 5 months old. I'd take them to auctions and sell them, and I was selling to people locally and trying to be, educate people on the Discus that they're a hardy fish. It was still pretty common that people thought that they were hard to keep, and what I started keeping them in the harder water, and what I noticed is they started actually doing better. They were thriving a little better in that harder water, but getting them to acclimate to that was tough. So I just kind of want to make this video and kind of tell you the story of how I got started and how Goldie started everything. And to this day, when I lose a fish, it tears me up, especially if it's my fault, if it's something I did. I do still bury my fish. It's just something that I do. I give respect. I do bury them in our garden. I believe it helps. The nitrogen helps the plants grow and everything. But I just don't throw the fish away. I know a lot of people just flush them down the toilet or throw them in the trash in a baggie and stuff like that. I don't do that. So that is why I am so focused on becoming knowledgeable on fish, because I want to constantly get better at this, and I still have so much to learn. Even though I've been doing this for 30 years, I'm still learning every day. And one thing that I've really tried to concentrate on is the communications, how fish communicate, how they interact, and how they kind of, I don't want to say talk to each other because that's not what they're doing, but their body language. Just grumpy, and sometimes he just wants to be left alone, and sometimes he's just, you know, irritated, and sometimes they're sick, and that's when I have to step in. So understanding the difference is something that I'm trying to get better at, is understanding how these fish communicate with each other and understanding that communication. So I know that's a little bit nerdy, over the top stuff, but it's just, after a while you get the basics down, and then you get to the next level, and then you get to the next level, and that's kind of the level I want to be at, is understanding how they communicate. I know my videos aren't the best quality, but I'm going to get better at them. But one thing I notice is I'm just putting out all this technical jargon and how I do stuff, and, you know, how to keep fish, and I wanted to make a video on why I keep fish. So that's very important to me, because I do come down and I sit just right here and I hang out and I feed the fish, and I feed them by hand. So that's one thing I like to do, is interact with them. So they do eat out of my hands. These are all my fry, and so they will constantly just come, and they are little water pigs. So anytime you see a discus that doesn't want to eat, you pretty much should know that that discus is sick. So I always want to see this interaction. I want to see them at the top of the water. This guy's a little older, and he's actually kind of hanging out by himself. He gets annoyed by these little ones, because they do pick at him, and they go after his slime coat. So they're still trying to get that protein from his slime coat, and he runs the tank, and he gets angry, and it's pretty fun to watch, because he puts them in their place when they go too far. They nip around and have fun, but they don't. It's nothing serious, and they never get a good hold of them. It's just quick, because they know as soon as they touch that fish that she's going to come after them. So they respect her, but they still mess around with her. So this is just something I do probably 2 or 3 times a week. I just come down and I feed these guys by hand. It's pretty cool to interact with them. I really appreciate everyone subscribing and watching my videos. I'm still just blown away, because I would have never thought in a million years that I would have had people watching my videos. So it's pretty cool, and I'm gonna keep going. And I still haven't set up my camera, but that's something, I know I keep promising that, but that's something I'm gonna end up doing here. It's just a time thing. I mean, just to sit down and make these videos and edit them. So this one won't be very edited. It'll just be more of me talking. And it basically started because of Goldie. And now right now I have 35 tanks, and I'm gonna expand this room to 60. And it was a discus room, and it's kind of moved into, so one of my other passions were the first synodontists. So the thing is I really enjoy catfish too, so I wanted to kind of split the room up and move out discus and breed catfish. So right now I have the Synodontis petricola, I'm getting the Lucipennis, I have the L number 134, the L number 397, the L number 333. I have the clown pleco. I have all the Corys we talked about, the Sturbai and the Venezuelan. But discus will always be the fish for me, because it's just something that once I got my first discus, it was over. It was just one of those fish I had to have. On is only bringing quality. I want just the very best. Are these championship world class? No, they're not. They're not dinner plates, but that's not important to me. What's important to me is they're healthy. They have good eye size. great finish, good color, but mostly they're just healthy. That's really, you know, a healthy solid discus. There's nothing like it in the world. And I've had big discus. I've had discus 10 inches. I've had them, and they're cool, and they become pets. But I find that more of the discus now are they're like that 6 to 7 inch, and that's pretty much perfect because they can be kept in these 29s all day long. This is a 90 long, and you see they've been hanging out by my shoulder the whole time. So they have a whole 6 feet of tank, and they hang out right here because they know where the food's coming from. And literally I'll walk through the door and you'll see them dart to the corner. They're excited to see me. And I understand it's about the food. You know, they're hungry. And these things could eat 10 times a day if I'd feed them. I feed them usually 3 to 4 and sometimes 5 times a day. And these guys over here are on eggs again. Now these guys are young. I'm having a hard time with them because the last couple times they've eaten the eggs, and it looks like they're eating them again. There's some unfertilized eggs. There's still some on there. But one thing I would try with these guys, because they're a lighter color, they're not darkening up once the fry get off the cone. And usually what I would do is I would have a foster parents, and I would just switch the cone out with the foster parents that are breeding. But I don't have any right now because these are all my grow outs, and I sold all my adults because I moved into the catfish. So what I sold those adults for is what I bought all these catfish for. So these guys are probably another 4 months, 4 or 5 months out probably before they'll start spawning. But yeah, so what I might try with these guys is so there's a couple tricks that breeders have taught me. Basically, if they're not finding the parents because they're not darkening up, I've heard blue light, so that could be something. Covering. So some people say to take the filter out and put an air stone in. What I do is I just take a white nylon, a woman's nylon, and I wrap the black because the babies go to the dark. And then what I'll do is I'll lower the water actually to the top of that cone. So that gives them a lot less room to go up and down, so the babies can find them a little easier. So those are a couple things I might try with the next one. But they've spawned. I mean, usually I've had discus take care of their spawns on the first try. I've had discus not take care of their spawns till 10 tries, and they're on their 7th try right now. So I'm still not giving up hope. But what I might do is split them up for a few months so I can get other breeders in here, because I don't want that female to be dropping eggs and then them just going to waste, because they're a beautiful pair. But the only thing with these guys is I think they are brother sister, because I don't know the lineage, and I hardly ever buy adult discus, but these guys, they were in the store and they looked great. I looked at their forehead, their eye size, everything looked great, but they were showing spawning behavior in the store, so I thought I'd give them a shot. It's really my first light discus I've ever tried to breed, so I know that that's an issue with some of the lighter species, but got some tricks up my sleeve. I think I'm gonna let them try to spawn a couple more times. If it doesn't work, then I'm gonna split them up. Now, when I say split them up, I'm not going to put them in different tanks. I'm going to keep them in the same tank and then put a light grate between them so they can still see each other, because I don't want to lose that bond, because they are bond. Even though discus are not monogamous, they will go mate with someone else. They are not just like a lot of bird species. They mate for life. The discus will go away, but once you break that bond, sometimes it's hard for them to get by. So these two are bonded. They mess around with each other. They push each other around, but they're always finding each other in the tank and kind of hanging out side by side and dipping and stuff. So they're beautiful. But the problem with the domestic discus is the inbreeding. It's there to get that fish. There's really no other way than to inbreed. So that's what I did with a lot of these. Is I bred these out with half wilds. So this guy is actually from another breeder. This guy is an Altum and red spot cross, carrying more of the wild gene. These are red covers, here, the red ones. And then this guy right here with the red is actually a red spot Altum carrying the red gene. So, and then I have the Heckle. So the big one there is a Heckle Mystic Red Cross. And then up there I have a Heckle Cross too. So I'm going to try to breed those. But if, and then also I have the other orange, the deep orange one. And you can see in my other videos that I'll cross over with these red covers. So what I'm always trying to do is spread out the gene pool a little bit. Because, you know, to keep a strain like that, you have to basically do a ton of inbreeding. And now they're brother and sister, so even if they don't breed successfully, I can have an option to breed them out with maybe one of my red covers and still get a cool looking fish, because they still have that pigeon blood gene in them. So I know I rambled on, but I could literally talk about Discus all day long, because it's just one of those things that I absolutely love. And I've spent 30 years learning and breeding and keeping. Even when I wasn't breeding, actually in this tank, I had a planted tank with about 6-7 Discus in it, and I just kept them because and I've always kept them. Either if I'm not breeding them, I'm keeping them. But just the beautiful fish. And when done right, they are healthy. I mean, they just need a few things. I need a little bit warmer water. I mean, 84 minimum. That's probably about what I would keep them at. 85 is that sweet spot for me. Good foods. Try to get them on pellet food. The Sarah Discus, I know it's expensive, but it's so worth it, because these guys are basically growing out on the Sarah food. They get freeze-dried foods, they get frozen foods, but their main diet is that Sarah. And I stopped feeding them the baby brine because only like 2 or 3 of them are eating that baby brine now. The rest of them aren't finding it anymore. But yeah, I just kind of wanted to go over on why I keep fish, not how to keep fish. I don't want to come off as a know-it-all, because I'm not a know-it-all. I have so much to learn, and I'm still learning every single day. I come home and there's something I learn from other keepers, and I don't care the age. I watch a little YouTube. I don't care if they're 20, and I don't care if they're 70. I'll learn from both of them. If they're 15, there's a fish keeper, Justin, in, I think he's Australia. And I've been watching his channel a little bit on the Rams, because I think he's really got a good thing going there. So I don't know how, he's like in his 20s, I think. But I've watched some videos of 15-year-olds keeping Discus and stuff. So yeah, I have a way I do it, and that's one thing I have to say is, if you find something that works for you and it's working, don't listen to anybody else, because everybody's going to tell you their way is the only way, and that's a bunch of BS. Because the only way you really can do things correctly is if it's working for you. And you got to take in so many different things, as far as water, the water coming in, the food you're feeding, the stock of your fish, where do they come from, you know. So there's so many different variables for each keeper. So if you're getting frustrated, let me just say that I've been very frustrated, and it just motivated me to get better at this. Many failures in my life as far as fish keeping, and I've just stuck with it, because every failure I learned something, and I moved forward, and I got better. Alright, so rambling, probably a long video that's not going to do very well on YouTube, but you know what, it's out there now, and so you can understand why I keep these fish. Thanks for watching, and I appreciate all the subscribers. I appreciate all the views. I really do. It's awesome. Thank you. Take care. Bye.